Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Dear viewers, peace be upon you. All praise be to Allah, and may His peace and blessings be on His last messenger, our Prophet, the most beloved, Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. I am Hatim Al-Hajj, Dr. Hatim Al-Hajj, and I will be in your company for the next few episodes to address the issue of the evolution of fiqh. You may think that the evolution of fiqh will be talking about the schools of fiqh, the different schools of fiqh, Hanafi, Maliki, Shafi'i, and Hanbali. However, this talk will not be only about the schools of fiqh. I mean by the evolution of fiqh, the evolution of my and your fiqh. I mean that by the evolution of fiqh is an introduction to fiqh that will help us evolve in our understanding of this religion. Fiqh is the understanding of the religion, and that's what it means linguistically. And our evolution of fiqh is certainly dependent upon and contingent upon our knowledge of certain principles that will make the studying and learning of fiqh easier for us and more productive and fruitful. In this series, we will talk about different points. One of them is the definition and meanings of fiqh, linguistic meanings and terminological meanings as well. We will also talk about the scope of fiqh, the spectrum of fiqh. We will talk about the importance of studying this subject, and we will certainly talk about the different schools of fiqh, schools of thought, namely the Hanafi, Maliki, Shafi'i, and Hanbali schools. We will also address the issue of moderation, and we will talk about the right definition of moderation, the right understanding of moderation. This term is certainly used by so many people. Everyone thinks that they are moderate, and everyone claims that they are the center, and most of the people do this. Most of the people think that they are in the center, and people to the right are far rightists, and people to their left are far leftists. We will talk today about the issue of moderation and what that term means and how we should understand moderation in the religion. We will also address the disagreements between the scholars and our position from these disagreements as public, as students of knowledge, and even as scholars. What should our position be from the disagreements between the different scholars and between the different schools of fiqh or Islamic thought? First of all, the meaning of fiqh, linguistically, it means understanding. It means simply understanding. To understand the subject, faqaha means understood. And it does not only mean to understand by your mind, it also means to understand by your heart. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hints to this point in this verse in which He said, قالوا يا شعيب ما نفقه كثيرا مما تقول وإنا لنراك فينا ضعيفا ولولا رهطك لرجمناك وما أنت علينا بعزيز. In this verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says about the people of Shu'aib that they said to him, O Shu'aib, we do not understand much of what you say, and we see you to be of the weak among us, and had it not been for your family, we would have stoned you, and you will not be mighty against us. In this ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about a different kind of understanding. It is not the understanding of the meaning, the linguistic meanings of what Shu'aib used to say to his people. In fact, Shu'aib was very eloquent, extremely eloquent. He is the khatib of the Anbiya, or the speaker of the Anbiya. Yet, they did not understand by their hearts. They did not understand the true meanings. They did not reflect upon them. They did not grasp the full meanings of what Shu'aib said and their implications. So fiqh is not only to understand the linguistic, superficial meanings of statements and lectures and so on. Fiqh is to have a complete grasp of the true meaning, the true essence of the statements, and to have a complete grasp of their implications by your mind as well as your heart. And that's what fiqh means. Now, in the terminology, fiqh usually is used to refer to the topics pertaining to the rulings. In the Islamic terminology, fiqh is not used as the understanding, the general understanding of the religion. This used to be the meaning of fiqh to the earlier generations, but to the latter generations, it meant understanding certain topics that pertain to the rulings. Now, these rulings could be rulings relating to your relationship with God, with Allah. In this case, they will be called ibadat, the acts of worship. They could also be rulings pertaining to your relationship with people, and in this case, they will be called transactions. They could also relate to your relationship with yourself, your way of dressing, your way of handling yourself in gatherings, and so on and so forth. And in this case, they'll be called customs, etiquettes, etc. And all of these are included in the topic of fiqh. So the topic of fiqh, terminologically, pertains to the rulings, the ahkam, or rulings, that control your relationship with Allah, your relationship with yourself, as well as your relationship with the people. Now, the importance of studying this topic, we can understand this importance from the statement of the Prophet ﷺ, or the statement of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in which he said, أَمْ لَهُمْ شُرَكَاء شَرَعُوا لَهُمْ مِنَ الدِّينِ مَا لَمْ يَأْذَنْ بِهِ اللَّهِ. Or do they have partners who prescribed for them in the religion that which Allah has not given permission about? And in this ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that no one prescribes in this religion. Do they have partners who prescribed for them in religion that which Allah has not given a permission about? It means that no one can prescribe or legislate except for Allah. Allah is the only legislator, and the Prophet ﷺ is the only conveyor. In order for us to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we have to worship Him as He likes, not as we like. And in order for us to worship Him as He likes, we have to know what He likes. No one can tell us about what Allah likes, what God likes, except the Prophet ﷺ, because he is the only conveyor. That is the meaning of Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. I bear witness that there is no God but Allah. Wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. And I bear witness that Muhammad is His messenger. The first part of this is about Allah being the only legislator, Allah being the only ultimate supreme ruler. And the second part of this shahada, or testimony of faith, is about the Prophet ﷺ being the only conveyor. So no one can tell us about Allah except through the Prophet ﷺ. Now, to worship Allah, we have to worship Him as He likes. To worship Him as He likes, we have to understand what He likes, and we can understand this from the revelation that was given to Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, which is the Quran, the Word of Allah, and the Sunnah, which is the traditions of the Prophet ﷺ. In order for us to have a good understanding of the Quran and the Sunnah, we have to have fiqh, which means understanding. So fiqh means the understanding of the revelation. And as we alluded to earlier, it particularly pertains to the understanding of the part of the revelation that deals with rulings. These rulings could be pertaining to our relationship with Allah or ourselves or others. So now the meaning, as we indicated, could be different. The definition could be different based on the phase based on the type of specialty. The definition could vary from a specialty to another specialty, but there is a certain definition that most of the people use for the terminological fiqh, which is al-ilm bil-ahkam al-tafsiliyya, to know the detailed rulings from adillatiha al-shar'iyya, from the scriptural evidence, to know and understand the detailed rulings from the scriptural evidence. This is a process. This is not easy. Certainly the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was made easy for us to understand, as well as the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but it does need certain training, certain preparation for us to be able to understand the book of Allah and the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Some people have better understanding of the language than others. Some people have more inclusive, more comprehensive knowledge of the Quran and the Sunnah, and this is where we have scholars of fiqh or fuqaha and public. The people who have a better understanding of the meanings of the words, the linguistic meanings of the words, and the people who have a more comprehensive knowledge of the book of Allah and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, and can reconcile between reports that could seem to us contradictory, whereas they are actually not contradictory, are the jurists or al-fuqaha, or the scholars of this particular topic, which is jurisprudence or fiqh. The Prophet ﷺ has encouraged us many times to seek the knowledge of fiqh. The Prophet said in a hadith, مَنْ يُرِدِ اللَّهُ بِهِ خَيْرًا يُفَقِّهُ فِي الدِّينِ. If Allah wants good for someone, Allah will give him good understanding of the religion. It's not only a matter of encouragement. In fact, the Prophet made the seeking of knowledge mandatory. The Prophet ﷺ said in a hadith, the seeking of knowledge is mandatory upon every male and female Muslim. He particularly said every male and female Muslim, Muslim or Muslima. Usually the Prophet ﷺ, and also in the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when Allah talks about males, the speech would be addressing both males and females. That's why the Prophet ﷺ said, إِنَّمَا النِّسَاءُ شَقَائِقْ الرِّجَالِ. Verily, women are the full sisters of men. Why is the address directed usually to men? This is very simple, because in the Arabic language, if you refer to men, or if you use masculine pronouns, they will be referring to both men and women, and people could understand that you're actually talking about a group that could be mixed. But if you are using feminine pronouns, people will not think that you're talking about a mixed group. People will think that you're talking about a group of women only. So that's why most of the time the speech in the Quran is addressing, or seems to be addressing, men, because it's using the masculine pronouns. However, it is addressing both men and women, and the Prophet ﷺ made this very clear when he was asked about it by one of the female companions, and he said clearly, verily women are the full sisters of men. But in this particular hadith, the Prophet ﷺ did not use Muslim only, or male Muslim only, but he made it a point to use both male and female Muslim, to emphasize the importance of knowledge for both males and females. We'll have a short break and then we'll come back to continue. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Welcome back to this series on the evolution of fiqh. Before the break, we were talking about the importance of seeking knowledge, and we mentioned the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ in which he said, seeking knowledge is mandatory upon every male and female Muslim. Prior to that, we talked about the scope of fiqh, the scope of jurisprudence, the definition of jurisprudence, and we did talk about the different kinds of definition, including the linguistic and terminological definitions. Now we will start a new point, which is the source of fiqh. The source of fiqh, and this is a very important point. Fiqh is taken only from the revelation. We did talk about the scope of fiqh before, and we said that fiqh teaches us how to interact with Allah, how to interact with ourselves and with other people. It's about the rulings. It guides our worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and in order for us to worship Him, we have to worship Him the way He likes, not the way we like. And we did say that in order for us to be able to do that, we have to seek that knowledge from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We have to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, how would you like us to worship you? How would you like us to interact with each other? How would you like me to interact with my mother, with my spouse, with my kids, with my neighbors, with my co-workers, with everyone? And if you seek this knowledge from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the source must be known. The source is the Book of Allah and the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam. The Book of Allah, the Quran, is the main source of fiqh. Certainly, the legislation in the Quran is the main source of legislation, and that should be our reference. It should be our constitution. It should be our code of ethics. We should always refer to the Quran. It is the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is the spoken word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so we should give it utmost importance. Also, the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is from Allah. It is not made up by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that he does not make up this Sunnah. He takes it from Allah. He receives it from Allah through Jibreel. In Surah Al-Najm, in the beginning of Surah Al-Najm, Allah says, وَمَا يَنْطِقُ عَنِ الْهَوَى وَمَا يَنْطِقُ عَنِ الْهَوَى إِنْ هُوَ إِلَّا وَحْيٌ يُوحَى. And he does not speak out of his own desire. It's only a revelation that is being revealed. And this is in reference to the Prophet ﷺ. So the Prophet never spoke out of his own desire, never spoke out of his own mind. He was only conveying the revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that he received from Jibreel, or directly from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through an inspiration, or directly from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, such as the command of the prayers. The Prophet ﷺ received this command from Allah directly in his journey of the ascent. So now, the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ must be the source of fiqh for all of us, must be the source for all of us. This creates a little problem for some people. Some people do not understand why should we then need different schools of fiqh. Why should we need jurists? Why should we need scholars of fiqh? Why do some people follow the Hanafi madhab, the Maliki madhab, the Shafi'i madhab, or the Hanbali madhab? People ask, are these different denominations? Like in other religions, there are different denominations. People ask, do they have different principles of understanding the deen, or do they have different aqidah, or different systems of belief? And certainly they do not. These madhabs or these schools of fiqh are all from Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. They all belong to the mainstream of Muslims, and they do not have any differences regarding the aqidah or the system of belief. Yet we need them because understanding the Book of Allah and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ requires us to have detailed knowledge, requires us to have encompassing knowledge. This is not only the knowledge of the Arabic language, even though it is important to understand the Book of Allah and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ to understand the Arabic language. However, not every Arabic linguist is capable of deducing rulings from the Book of Allah or the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. The great scholars or fuqaha, particularly the four imams that we will be talking about them, we will be talking about their biography, we'll be talking about their scholarly ancestry and their students and the evolution of their schools. these were not only knowledgeable in Arabic, but they were also knowledgeable in the Quran. They were memorizers of the Quran. They understood the meanings of the Quran quite well. They were knowledgeable in the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. They had encompassing knowledge. And encompassing knowledge is extremely important because partial knowledge could create more problems. If you don't understand your limitations, you can create more problems by having partial knowledge. Our ancestors used to say, 4 people can destroy the life of all people, including half a jurist, because half a jurist would ruin your religion, your practice of the religion, your worship of God. Half a linguist will ruin your language. Half a doctor will ruin your body, and half a philosopher will ruin your mind. So these 4 people can ruin the life of all people. Why? Because if you have partial knowledge and you do not know that you have partial knowledge, then you can create more problems than someone who does not have any knowledge, because you could seem to some of the people knowledgeable, and you could think of yourself as a knowledgeable person, and then you can start to prescribe things for people, or to convey your convictions, which could be false, to other people. These imams, or these scholars and founders of the madhahib, and the other imams of Islam, great imams of Islam, had encompassing knowledge, which protected them from this problem of partial knowledge. Now, we do understand the fact that the Quran and the Sunnah were complete before the departure of the Prophet ﷺ, and the Imams did not add anything to them or delete anything from them. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed to the Prophet ﷺ in the farewell pilgrimage, Hajjat al-Wada', this ayah, this beautiful ayah, اليوم أكملت لكم دينكم اليوم أكملت لكم دينكم وأتممت عليكم نعمتي ورضيت لكم الإسلام دينا. Today I have completed your religion for you, perfected my favor upon you, and I have chosen Islam for you as your religion. So if Islam is complete, and the Quran and the Sunnah are sufficient, and they are the prime source of the revelation, why do we need the madhahib, or what was the function of the different madhahib? The function of the different madhahib is not about adding or deleting, as we said. However, it is about the compiling of knowledge, reconciling of reports that could seem contradictory, arranging knowledge into chapters and titles and subtitles and so on and so forth. They were also about simplification of knowledge. So they came in a period where the collection of the Sunnah was still active. They helped collect the Sunnah with the other Imams who helped the collection of the Sunnah. They helped reconcile between some reports that could seem contradictory, protect the Sunnah from any invasion of false reports. They also helped simplify for us the fiqh by deducing rulings from the Quran and the Sunnah, the statements of Allah and the statements of the Prophet ﷺ. They deduced those rulings based on certain principles. These are called the principles of jurisprudence, or usul al-fiqh. Each madhab, each school of thought, Hanafi, Maliki, Shafi'i, or Hanbali, had their own principles of thought, and based on these principles, they deduced rulings for us, simplified them, put them in titles and subtitles. The Prophet ﷺ did not write a book on fiqh that starts with tahara, purity, and then salah, prayers, zakah, charity, siyam, fasting. He did not do that. They did that for us, and they certainly have our respect for this great effort they invested into this religion to help us understand it. Before we talk about the four Imams, I would like to ask myself and you this question: are there only four Imams? Certainly not. There are four popular Imams. There are four known Imams. There are four established schools of fiqh or schools of thought, but there were not four Imams in the history of Islam. There were thousands of great Imams in the history of Islam, from the time of the Sahaba, may Allah be pleased with them, to the followers of the Sahaba, which are called the Tabi'un, to the followers of Tabi'un, which are called Tabi'in, the third generation. There were thousands of Imams, and sometimes they had their own distinct school of fiqh. Even during the time of the four Imams, Abu Hanifa, Malik, Al-Shafi'i, and Ahmad, there were other Imams. There were Imams such as Sufyan al-Thawri, Al-Awza'i, and Al-Layth ibn Sa'd. In fact, sometimes people use the term the seven jurists. The seven jurists can sometimes refer to the seven jurists of Al-Madinah, or sometimes refer to the four Imams, or the seven Imams, sometimes refers to the four Imams, and Al-Layth ibn Sa'd, Sufyan al-Thawri, and Al-Awza'i. Sufyan al-Thawri was certainly a resident of Al-Kufa in Iraq. Al-Layth ibn Sa'd was a resident of Egypt, and Imam Al-Awza'i was a resident of Greater Syria. They have a college now in Syria, or actually a university in Lebanon, named after him. And these were contemporaries of the four Imams, and they were just as knowledgeable as the four Imams. Sometimes, or some people even think that some of these scholars or jurists were even more knowledgeable than some of the four Imams. It's certainly not our position to say who's more knowledgeable than who. These are all great Imams and scholars of the religion, but this is just an important point that I want all of us to understand. Islam did not only know four great Imams. Islam knew thousands of great Imams. Those four great Imams, for reasons we will discuss later in a different episode, inshallah, God willing, are the ones who became popular, and their schools of thought became established within the Ummah and amongst the Muslim public. Until I see you, inshallah, in the next episode, have my greetings, and may Allah's peace and blessings be upon you all.